So once you've fiddled around with the settings and gotten a little more used to moving around in Onshape, you might be wondering how to start making sketches. Essentially, sketches are 2D representations, almost like drawings, that you can make, and they're important because they're the foundation to making 3D objects, which is essentially what CAD is, making 3D models. So you're going to start here, click on the sketch button on the top left, and it's going to pop up with a menu. You'll notice that the sketch name is red. That means, and you can read as I hover over it, sketch 1 did not regenerate properly, select a sketch plane. That means its conditions are undefined. Every time you open up a menu like this and you see the name is red, one of the conditions is not met. That's what it's telling you. So in this case, it's asking for a sketch plane. And you can see in the center screen, it says select a sketch plane. So right now, I can select one of these 3 planes that are predefined for me on Onshape. I'm just going to click the front plane because that's the most easiest. And you'll see now that the sketch 1 object, sketch 1 plane is now attached to the front plane. When I move around, you'll see it's attached. Alright. So now I can click to confirm. I can click to confirm the sketch. I can double click, enter back into the sketch. If I click X while I'm in the middle of sketching, so let's say I make a new sketch and I click front plane again and I click X, it'll completely destroy my sketch. I can restore it here if I want to. So I'm just going to double click and enter back into my sketch. Here I can rename it. Now it's important to rename your sketch when you're working on big projects because it helps with organization. You can actually read what steps you take, and if you're collaborating with other people, you should be able to better understand each other's work. Alright, so I'm just going to confirm the sketch. Or sorry, enter back into it. So let's talk this row set of icons right here. These are your basic shapes that Onshape gives you. To select this icon, you can click on it, or you can hover over it and look at. It'll give you a description, as well as its shortcut. You can see on the parentheses, it says L. So if I press L on my keyboard, it'll automatically select line. These shortcuts are really helpful for you. Most of these functions are going to have a shortcut for you to use and memorize. All it does is just improve how quickly you work. Alright, so let's click this line. And with the line, I can just click. Right? And you can see I can drag around, change the length of the line where it is. I can just click and drag here. And this might be a little weird at first, but Onshape does continue off with a line. This way you can draw shapes like connect lines pretty quickly. If you ever want to, okay, so I'm just deleting this by pressing down my left button, dragging, and hitting backspace. So if you ever want to just exit out of the line operation, you can just click escape, and you'll see it's no longer selected, and I'm good to go. Alright, the same goes for these rectangles. You'll notice there's a drop-down menu for some of these shapes, and this just helps you with the different types of defining, different ways of defining the same shape. So I can click center point rectangle, drag it, and this is a rectangle that comes out from its center, right? Like that. And then also a corner rectangle. I can define it by its corner. Alright. Just gonna drag, right click, drag, delete this. Circles, same thing. Center point circle. Draws from the center. you have to click a point for it. When you select it, you have to click a point. That's where the center of the circle is. Sorry, you can click it again and exit out of it, like that. A bunch of different ways of defining this. I'm not going to go over all of them today. There's also the arc. It's a 3-point arc, so an arc is essentially what? Part of a circle. Right, so I can click 3-point arc, like that. I need to click 2 endpoints and then define a radius. Alright, so I'll go ahead and drag and delete this. Lastly, we have the point. Just add different points. You can connect these points to the line. Pretty simple. Just helps with further defining your shapes. Alright, so once we've finished with this, let's say I have a line here. You're going to be wondering, this line is completely undefined, or it's defined but it doesn't have any measurements, right? I can change the length of it, I can move it around, it has no position really. I can change like the entire line. And this is something that is underdefined. Blue lines are always underdefined in Onshape. If you see a blue line, that means it's underdefined, right? You haven't met all the requirements. To fully define something, you're going to want to change it to a black line. And in order to do that, you're going to need to follow the size, location, and orientation process. Alright, so for this line, well, okay, we can think of size, location, orientation as sort of checklist that you need to follow, right? Size is defined by the measurement of the entity itself. So, if I were to press the D for dimension, now this is an important tool. D for dimension, this is how, this button up here is how you're going to add measurements to any of your entities. I'm going to select my D, my dimension tool, and click the line and drag out. And you're going to see, right, as I move my cursor, that it gives me a measurement. I can redefine this measurement by just pressing, I don't know, I can just reset the value like 12 and set it to a 12-inch line if I want it to be. Alright, I can drag this around afterwards. This is going to be just a permanent like measurement that shows up here. If I want to edit it, I can double click and go ahead and change the length if I want to, so 6. And if I really wanted to, I can even go and do operations like 6 plus 2. Sorry, 6 plus 2. That'll give me 8. Pretty neat tool. Dimensioning tools can be pretty important for almost all of your sketches, because you're going to need to define these things. Alright, so that's size. Size covered, right? We have the size, we have the measurement of the entity. Now we need the location. So to check off location, you're going to need to, again, click the dimension. Or not, you don't need to click the dimension, but you can think of location as sort of the distance of the entity, in this case the line, in relation to the origin, right? So in 3D space, nothing is defined. The origin is the only place that's defined for you. So all your sketches are going to be built off the origin, right? So all of your lines are going to be blue until you define it off the origin, or define it off something else that's defined off the origin. Okay, that's a lot. It's kind of complicated to understand, but to just completely to fulfill the location requirement for this line, I can just drag it and snap it to the origin. Alright, so now the location in relation to the origin is defined, right? I can't move it, and it's completely set. Lastly is orientation. In order to define orientation, you can think of it as sort of angle relevant relative to a flat line. So no matter what, every object is going to have an angle in relation to a flat line. So in this case, my flat line is going to be my top face, my top plane. So what I can do is I can press D, or just click the button, dimension my line here, and click the top plane. And the top plane in this case sort of acts like a flat line. I can actually define, so let me do that again. I can press D, click the line, click the top plane, and it'll open up this angle for me. And just like my other dimension tool with the line, I can just define my own angle. So my size is fulfilled, right? It's black now. My line is black. My size is fulfilled. My location is fulfilled. It's on the origin. And my orientation is fulfilled. 60 degrees from this x axis here. All right. So you can do this with any one of your any one of your shapes here. Circle. I will need to define its size, right? 2 radius or 2 diameter. By the way, if you see this circle with a cross, with a line intersecting it, that is a symbol for diameter. So I define the diameter. I still move it around, so I'm going to need to define its position in relation to the origin. 3. Let's just do whatever. 3 and 3. So both its horizontal and its vertical in this case. And now I have specific, I think of it as like x coordinates and y coordinates. So specific x and y coordinates away from the origin. All right. So it's actually important to note that if you want to define location correctly, you don't necessarily have to define it off the origin, right? Location is defined by the distance of the object relative to the origin, or another line that's already defined in relation to the origin. So technically, what you can do is you can press D, right, and define it off this point instead, because this point, this line is already defined relative to the origin. So I can press 2, and let's see. If I define, let's see if I make a line here, like this. I can make this like, I don't know, 5, doesn't matter. I can also define it off. Hold on. There we go. Alright, I can also define it off this bottom line. D. Like this. Now it's completely defined. And you notice I didn't do it off the origin, I did it off this line up here. Like that. Alright, so this concept of size, location, orientation is going to be super important for you moving forward, and it's probably going to guide you through making all of your sketches.